Hello there, my name's Jo Brewis and I work at the Open University Business School where I am a professor in the Department of People and Organisations, and I'm here with Hannah O'Neill, who's the Labour candidate for Milton Keynes South. So what are the really brilliant things about Hannah? Well, there's lots of brilliant things about Hannah, but I think the main thing is that she's a local girl. She's lived and worked in Milton Keynes all her life, so she really understands the issues that the city faces. She's been on the local council for a number of years. She's currently deputy leader of the council. And looking at the pledges that Hannah's made as part of her own manifesto for the constituency, it's very clear that she already embodies key issues in the National Labour manifesto. So, for example, she's been at the forefront of driving forward the building of new council houses in Milton Keynes for the first time in some time. She's also been at the forefront of driving the Milton Keynes Green Industrial Revolution, and of course all of those things are very much embedded in the National Labour manifesto. And the other very brilliant thing is that she's got a very, very, very good chance of winning. So, hello Hannah.
Hello.
Hello. So, one of the things that the Labour manifesto I think does so well is just how much attention it pays to issues around gender and sex inequality. So I wondered if you could just talk through some of the key manifesto commitments.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what's really exciting about this manifesto is it is talking about delivering real change for women, which is really just so important, and something that over the last 10 years we've seen kind of women really suffer under austerity. So I think this manifesto is fantastic in terms of really changing that for women. So I mean, some of the highlights for me are increasing maternity pay from 9 to 12 months and doubling paternity leave, which I think is really critical for new parents. Putting right the terrible wrong of the WASPI women and what's happened there, making sure that we are going to deliver compensation and support those women, because that is just so important. I'm sure we'll talk about it further on, but my mum was a WASPI woman, so understanding what that kind of group of women have sort of been dealing with is really difficult. And then sort of some way connected to that is our pledges around menopause and supporting women in work around menopause, and making sure that employers offer flexible working and time off for illness and all those things, and recognising that menopause is something is a real issue for women when they go through it, and I think that's really key. And then just more of the wider stuff, so things like free the 30 hours for 2-year-olds, so allowing women to get back into the workplace sooner and being able to kind of pick up their careers sooner. All of these things are just going to really help, I think, which is fantastic and just so important.
What I think is really brilliant about the manifesto is that it recognises, if you like, the 7 ages of woman, to coin a phrase.
Yeah.
So for younger women, perhaps it's all the difficulties around the gig economy.
Yeah.
And I know that you've got particular experience with supporting men and women in precarious work. So you can talk a little bit about that?
Well, yeah, I mean, I've dealt sort of in individual cases, and my casework as a counsellor, I've come across quite a number of people who have been in the gig economy and have really sort of struggled with that. But also, in Milton Keynes, we had the TGI strikes, and I was able to go along on the picket line and support them. And obviously we've got Lauren Townsend, who is just phenomenal, a real advocate for that group of people, and also a woman, which I think is so important. She's out there and she's got that experience, and she's able to kind of take that forward, and that's really critical. So I think I'm really proud of the work I've done with individuals around that and supporting them, because the gig economy is shocking, and the way it treats its workers is shocking, and obviously Labour are going to challenge that, and we're going to get rid of this kind of phony idea of self-employment, and I think that's
independent contractors.
That's going to be huge. It's going to be huge for people, individually on the ground. From day one, they're going to really see a benefit from our manifesto, which it's about delivering real change, and that's what we're offering.
And another group of women who I think have been pretty much ignored for decades, actually, by party politics, if you like, are women who've gone through domestic abuse.
Yeah.
And I know that, again, there's pledges in the Labour manifesto around those women.
Yeah. What we're offering is making sure that women who are domestic abuse survivors are getting 2 weeks, I think it's 2 weeks, paid leave on leaving a relationship, which is just so important, because once you leave a relationship, you don't know where you're going to end up. You don't know if it could be miles away. It's just so important that you haven't got to worry about making sure your job's there at the end of the day. You've got that stability, and you've got that security, and that's just an added protection for women, just to kind of really help them leave that relationship.
And then the other group of women, and you've again touched on this in the comments that you made previously, but women in midlife and older women, again, I think really are in lots of ways. In some ways they're invisible, and in other ways they're visible in problematic ways. So we've got the WASPI women who, as you said, have been treated appallingly, really, in terms of changes to the pensionable age. And it's also the case that the gender pay gap is most pronounced for men and women in their 50s.
Yep.
And then if we translate that over into the gender pension gap, which is almost 40%, which is just appalling. And it's no coincidence to me that menopause is something that often, not always, but often happens in midlife. And I think that must be inextricably bound up with issues around the gender pay gap and the gender pension gap.
Yeah.
So talking about those issues, what would Labour do to address some of those challenges?
Yeah, we absolutely recognise that the gender pay gap is just appalling. 40 years after the Equal Pay Act came into power, we're still fighting for equal pay, and you and I are working for free now by this time of year, which is just appalling. So we are pledging to really tackle the gender pay gap, making sure that employers are really open and transparent about their pay and making sure that people are paid equally for the work they do. No employer should get away with paying a man and a woman different amounts of money for the same job. It's just absurd. Yeah,
absolutely. And I know that Labour have got a specific commitment around what I would broadly call the reproductive life cycle, and I know there is material in the policy around supporting women who are going through menopause, and not everybody struggles, but quite a significant amount of women do. So what are those sorts of pledges around work in particular?
Yeah, it's about making sure employers offer flexible working, about making sure they recognise that women may have to take time off for sickness and other reasons, like for medical appointments. So it's about making sure that employers recognise that, and again, just giving women that security that they can deal with any issues they're going through and deal with the changes that are happening to their body without worrying that they're not going to have a job at the end of it.
Yeah, because actually those sorts of initiatives would help women of any reproductive age, so including women who are struggling with their periods or perhaps have gynecological conditions like endometriosis or premenstrual dysphoric disorder or polycystic ovarian system. But actually, to my mind, if you introduce these things, they probably ought to be available for everybody who works in an organisation, regardless of what their biological sex is.
Yeah, I know, I absolutely agree. And I think that the fact that we're starting off, with menopause means that, we're taking that step towards recognising that women have different issues throughout life. And you're right, I think it's so important that across the board that people don't have to worry about changes in their life or changes to their body and not having a job at the end of it. It's so important that people have that security. And I think one of the other areas, again, we don't talk about is, those first 12 weeks of pregnancy when women, are extremely poorly, but often don't feel they can tell anybody because, it's not seen to be done. And you're kind of like, dealing with going to work and all those things. And I think that what we're doing in this manifesto is kind of really starting to tackle some of those issues and really starting to say, actually, we need to recognise that women in particular go through a variety of changes in their life and a variety of physical issues that we need to recognise, and that they may not always be on form, they may not always be 100%, and we need to recognise that and give that space and security to women to be able to deal with it.
Yeah, and I think your use of the word always there is really important. It's not always the case that women are having to kind of manage their bodies, as it were. These are all phases, all of them.
Absolutely.
But if employers can recognise that sometimes some women will struggle to perhaps even come to work in the first place, and then maybe be quite as motivated and hardworking as they would at other times in their lives or in the months even. As long as that can be recognised and the flexibility put in place, then it's going to go a long way.
Absolutely, and it's scientifically recognised that women have, at different parts of the month they will have different
hormones going like this.
Absolutely, and I think having that we have to translate that recognition into the workplace and recognising that it can be a challenge for some women, and that they shouldn't be penalised for basically being a woman. It goes against everything we stand for.
Yes, exactly.
Vote for Hannah O'Neill on Thursday the 12th of December, for the many, not the few.